Hey guys, for our last video, we are going to make a super fun and cute yarn bird craft. But before that, I really want to encourage you all to go out and learn a little bit more about the birds found here in Iowa. So I have a few books here that are bird guides. You can maybe find some books at your local library or even research online. But I have a few books here. Here is The Birds of Iowa. I really like this one because it shows pictures. It's not just cartoon drawings. It shows actual pictures and it tells all about them, and it actually sorts the book by the color of the bird. So if you see a brown bird, you go to the brown section. So I really like that one. Then I also have this Iowa bird book. This is a good one as well. The only thing that makes it really different from the other one is it has more like cartoon drawings of birds. So if you look at that, it's more of a cartoon drawing. It still tells lots of information about each of the birds, so it is a great book. It also has a quick like a shortcut guide on the back and right on the inside. So if you think you know what bird you saw, you can look here and it'll tell you exactly what page it's on. And this one sorts the book by that little reference guide. So once you find what you think the bird was, it'll tell you what page to go to. So it's sorted by waterfowl, diving birds, shorebirds, things like that. So this is also a really great one if you want to learn about Iowa birds. And then the last book I have is more on a field guide to birds of North America. So it looks like this. It's the Peterson guidebook. Peterson is a great author of all sorts of guidebooks. So I really like this one too. The only thing about this one is it literally has all the birds of North America. So unless you know exactly what you saw, it's sometimes harder to figure out what type of bird it is. So this one, this is the warblers page. So it shows all the different types of warblers, and on the other side it shows kind of their range. So this one's helpful to determine what you didn't see, because if you look at it and you see that their range isn't in Iowa, you know that you probably didn't see that bird. So these three books are great if you are first starting out and want to learn about birds. I suggest this one. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. But I hope you guys research some birds and find some cool ones. Okay, so once you have researched some birds a little bit and picked out your favorite bird here in Iowa, we are going to make a yarn bird that looks like it. So I picked out my favorite bird here in the Birds of Iowa book. It's in the blue section, so I'm going to turn to that section. It is a tree swallow. So I really liked how it was blue and kind of shiny on top, and that stands out against the white and the black. So I made my example yarn bird to look like that one. So the colors aren't exact, but I had some blue and some black and some white. So I tried to make mine look like a tree swallow. And when you guys make your birds, you can make it look like your favorite bird. But if you don't have the right colors of yarn, that's okay. We'll just use whatever you have to make your bird. Here is what you will need to make your yarn bird. You will need a ruler. You want to make sure it does have centimeters on it though, because we will be measuring in centimeters for this activity. You'll need a piece of cardboard. Any size will work because we will be cutting these down into smaller pieces. You need a pencil so you can mark what you're measuring. For your yarn bird, you'll need some yarn. You can have up to 3 different colors. It really doesn't matter what colors you have, it just depends on how you want your yarn bird to look. You will need some rubber bands. If you have these little hair tie rubber bands, they work great, but a normal one will work just fine as well. You'll need some scissors so you can cut your yarn in your cardboard. You'll need a hot glue gun and some glue. And then when you're ready to put the eyes and the beak on, you can be creative and use whatever you have to make the beak and the eyes. But for the beak, I'm going to use a piece of felt. And for the eyes, I'm going to use some little beads for that. And finally, you'll need some fishing line if you have it. If you don't, you can just use a piece of yarn. This is for hanging your yarn bird. And another optional one you will need a yarn needle. This is helpful in the last step, but it's not necessarily needed. And almost before I forget, you also need a piece of paper. I have found that it works better to use a half a piece of paper because these birds do turn out kind of small, but you'll understand when we get to the instructions. All right, so once you have all your supplies around, we can learn how to make a yarn bird. But again, I picked a bird out of my Birds of Iowa book that I kind of wanted my yarn bird to look like. It's kind of a pinkish reddish color, so I'm gonna go to that section. And here it is. It is a purple finch. I just think they're so pretty. I love the pinkish colors with the brown. So I'm going to try to make my yarn bird look like this. But first, we need to make our cardboard pieces. So I'm gonna set my book over here. And we are going to be making cardboard pieces to wrap your yarn around. So here are the cardboard pieces I made when I was making my example. I have them labeled. Basically, you're going to make 2 9-centimeter long pieces and 1 12-centimeter long pieces. The 12-centimeter one is for the head or back, and the other 2 are for the front and the belly and the wings. So we are going to do that with this piece of cardboard as well. So I'm going to measure my 12-inch or 12-centimeter piece first. And I believe when I did this last time, yep, it's just a little over 12 centimeters. I know that's the longest one, so this is about 12 centimeters. So I'm gonna actually cut these into 3 pieces and cut out my 12 centimeters and then measure my 9 centimeters as well. Okay, so I cut out my pieces. This one is 12 centimeters for my head. I've got 9 centimeters for my wings and 9 centimeters for my front or belly. So I'm going to move these out of the way. And next you are going to wrap your yarn around these pieces of cardboard. So that is where you can decide what you want your bird to look like. So I'm gonna look back at my picture. Here's what it looks like again. So I have 3 different colors of yarn. I think I'm going to do this brown color for its wings. I'm going to do this tan color for its belly since there's some tan on there. And then I'm going to do this purpley red color for its head. So what you're going to do is you're gonna pick which one you wanna start with. I'm gonna start with the head. And again, that one's 12 centimeters. So I'm going to take my purpley color that I wanna use for the head and I'm going to start wrapping. So when you wrap, you want to start with a little tiny piece up there. Start wrapping long ways and kind of wrap over that piece to hold it in place. Okay, do you see how that's kind of held in place? So then you're just going to keep wrapping. Try to wrap evenly, cover most of the piece of cardboard. Okay, so I've been wrapping. It's about even on both sides. And the way that I measure it is you want it to be about the thickness of your pinky. So I'd say I have a little bit more to go. So I'm gonna wrap just a little bit more. Okay, so let's see here. I'd say that's about the thickness of my pinky, so I'm going to cut that one. I try to cut it at the same end that I started, so I'll cut that one. Put it there. And now I'm going to move on to my wings and my belly. Okay, so I've got all 3 pieces of cardboard wrapped. So now I am going to cut one end. So I'm gonna cut the end that I started and ended with. You see how that one's still there? So what you're going to do is you're gonna take your cardboard, you're gonna slip your scissors right under that yarn, and you are going to, I'm gonna actually go from this side because it's slicker. it under there, and you're going to cut that yarn. Kind of like if you were making a pom-pom. And you're going to take that yarn and you're going to spread it out like that. Okay, and then I'm going to do that for the other two as well. Okay, so I have my head and my wings and my belly cut. So now what you're going to do is you are going to put the head horizontal, and you're going to put the belly on top vertically, kind of like creating a cross. So now what you're going to do is you are going to fold the right side of the head over the top of the belly, kind of like this. And you're going to take a little piece of yarn. I'm going to use the same color as the head. And you're going to tie it so that they are held together. So I'm going to slip this underneath, get as close as I possibly can, and you are going to tie it. You want to tie it pretty tight so that it stays good. I did a double knot because I wanted to make sure that it stays really well. And then I'm going to trim the excess yarn there. Next, you are going to fold the belly over. So you're going to fold this part over the top like this. And tie this piece together. So I'm going to get a little piece of yarn from that one. Okay, so then the front of it should kind of look like this. You've got the head and the belly. Now you want to take the wings, take a little piece of yarn of that color, and tie it right in the middle. So I'm going to take that and tie a knot. All right, so now I've got a knot there. Now I'm going to take my head and my belly, and I'm going to put it right on top of the wings. Next, you're going to take your piece of paper and you are going to crumple it into a small ball. So I'm going to crumple it here. This is why we're using a half a piece of paper, because if you use a whole piece of paper, it makes a really big ball and it doesn't fit inside the bird. So this crumpled up piece of paper is going to be your bird's body. It's going to give it its shape. So here's the tricky part. You are going to take these groups of yarn and you're going to wrap it around this crumpled up piece of paper. So I put my piece of paper right under the wings, and you are going to take your groups, just kind of use your hands and wrap it around the piece of paper. Now sometimes it might feel a little too big, which it kind of does at this point. So I'm going to uncrumple it, cut off a little section, crumple it into an even smaller ball. Okay, so again, I'm going to put that right in the middle of these sections. And I'm going to kind of grab hold of all three sections and wrap them around the piece of paper, kind of like that. Okay, and that's where you're going to take your rubber band or your little hair tie, and you're going to wrap it around and connect all of these groups of yarn. Now it takes some working with, but you gotta kind of gather all the pieces of yarn together before you put the rubber band on. So I'm going to gather it all together and tie them into one big group. Okay, so I've got my rubber band around the bottom of the bird. This is going to create the tail, and you can kind of mess with the yarn a little bit, make sure it's covering the piece of paper. Mine kind of has some funky little feathers sticking up, but that's okay. And next you are going to cut the tail. Now if you were using a normal rubber band and you didn't want that color showing, you can take a piece of yarn and tie it around that so you can't see it, but mine's clear, so I'm just going to leave it. So now I'm just going to cut the tail to make it all kind of one length, so it's not all different lengths and sizes. Okay, so I cut my tail, kind of comes to a little point. You can do whatever shape you'd like. I just didn't want mine to be so big and bushy. So now I am going to clean up a little bit and plug in my hot glue gun and let that warm up, and then we'll move on to the next step. So my hot glue gun is warming up now. So I'm going to look back at my bird that I was trying to make my yarn bird look like, the purple finch. And if you look at it, it kind of has a light colored beak. So I chose to use this tan colored felt for that. And then he's got some kind of dark eyes. So I'm going to use these little wooden beads for his eyes. So what we're going to do now is add his beak and eyes. So I'm going to use this felt, and I'm just going to cut out a shape and kind of roll it to look like a beak, and then we'll glue that on. So I've got a little beak shape here. Now again, you can use whatever you can find, but I happen to have some felt, so I'm going to glue that on to my bird. Now he's got a little beak on there, so the last step is to add his eyes. And again, I'm just going to use the hot glue gun and glue these beads onto his eyes. Okay, now he's got his little eyes on there. I think they turn out pretty cute. And finally, the last step is to hang your bird. So if you have fishing line, it works great because you can't really see it, so it looks like your bird is flying. Otherwise, you can use a piece of yarn. So I'm going to cut a piece of fishing line. And I am going to use my yarn needle to get through the bird. You can just stick the fishing line through, it works just fine. I just like to use the needle because it helps it go through easier. So I've got my fishing line on my needle, and I am going to stick the needle through his head. I found if you hang it from the head, it hangs more up. If you hang it from its body, it kind of hangs sideways like this, and I want mine to be up. So I'm going to stick it through its head, just like that. Pull it through so that I have my fishing line in there, and then I'm just going to knot it. All right, and there you go. Now you have your own little yarn bird. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about birds this month, and I hope you had fun making your little yarn birds. I know I did. That's it for our videos about birds, but stay tuned for next week. We'll have a very special announcement, and next month we are going to learn about a very special animal to us. See you next week. Thanks, guys.